Yes, people want to try new things, but there's a little bit of sensory overload where you just want to spend your hard-earned dollar on something that you can trust is going to be a great experience every single time. And so in a world where you're feeling a little uncomfortable, which people are right now, and loneliness and volatility and some of that heavy stuff, going back to a brand that just gives you that comfort and inspires that happy memory is super powerful.
In today's world, how does a brand break through the noise and become iconic? Join me, Jason Harris, as I speak with the world's leading marketing experts about how they use soul and science to build an iconic brand. Think of it as EQ meeting IQ. So let's lock in and together fast forward our marketing minds on the Soul and Science podcast. Welcome back to the Soul and Science podcast. On this episode, I'm joined by Stacy Taffet, approaching a year almost in as Chief Growth Officer at the Hershey Company. And we're going to explore what it really takes to evolve a 130-year-old iconic company / brand without losing its soul. We're going to dig into how Hershey's rethinking marketing, responding to changing consumer expectations, expanding into new snack spaces, while keeping timeless brands like Reese's and Hershey's and all the other brands you love, feeling culturally relevant and alive. So we're going to talk today on the Soul and Science of modernizing timeless brands. Welcome to the podcast, Stacy.
Thank you, Jason. It's good to see you.
It's great to see you too. It's been a while. It's been a minute.
Yeah.
I always love for our guests to give our listeners a little bit of their background and how they got into what they're doing. And a quick kind of synopsis of your career trajectory.
Yeah, happy to. So for me, it all started with a fascination about why people do what they do, why they behave in certain ways, what motivates them, why they make decisions. I remember when I was a kid, I would just be observing and watching people. It probably was really creepy, but it was just something I was always interested in. So that curiosity led me to study psychology and economics in college. And that was before behavioral economics was even a thing. And then ultimately it steered me toward marketing. I began my career at American Express and spent the majority of my professional time at PepsiCo. And there I was fortunate to hold a variety of roles across the organization. I learned how to connect deep consumer understanding to business strategy, how to drive growth by making our brands truly indispensable in people's lives. I worked on iconic brands like Pepsi, Doritos, Cheetos, Lay's, Bubbly, and led transformational efforts across the portfolio. And that brings me to Hershey. So I have long admired the company, its brand portfolio, its business performance, and its philanthropic legacy. Today, I lead the growth office, where marketing, insights, R&D, communications, and a few other functions all come together as powerful engines of consumer connection and innovation.
I love that. So when you were in school, did you think of, I was also an econ major, by the way, but I always knew I was going to go into advertising. I kind of did it because my parents didn't know what advertising was and they paid for my education. So I did it for them, but I didn't love it. Did you know that would help you in marketing, or did you think you would take those skills and do some other job, or were you not sure?
Well, I think we must have a lot in common because the soul and science is why I liked social science and economics. And, I really looked for a way that I could put those two things together. And so as I started to explore, what do you do with this? When you really love to study people, you're also really analytical and love to understand business. And it led me to marketing.
I love that. And you were at Pepsi for the bulk of your career.
17 years.
This is a question I've been running Mechanism for 20 years. So there's a question for me, I guess, and our audience. But how do you get the feeling when it's, you're comfortable, you're successful at an organization, you've kind of done a lot of different roles. How do you know when it's time to take that big step and try something new?
Yeah, I think, look, I was really lucky to be at terrific companies all my whole career. And I learned so much and I was surrounded by incredible talent. And, for me, I am happiest when I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm continuously taking on new challenges. and I'm inspired and passionate about what I'm doing. And so I had that my whole career. And when Hershey came calling with this idea of standing up this, the growth office with all these different functions and bringing all these different types of consumer first opportunities together to drive outsized growth in a company that I've admired and had really deep roots in philanthropy and community, it just felt like a risk that it was time to take.
What do you think you're particularly good at that makes you good at your job that maybe other people are okay at? But what do you feel like the Stacy superpower is?
Well, I like the term superpower. And usually when people ask me that, I tell them that I am a champion sleeper. That is my superpower.
That is a very good superpower.
I can sleep anywhere, anytime, get up and then take a nap. So it's a real gift. So that's my real superpower. When it comes to work though, I would come back to this left brain, right brain thing. I am equally passionate about building a financial model as I am about writing poetry. And I think that creates a balance and has allowed me to flex each part of that throughout my career to really round me out in terms of how I think about connecting with the consumer in both of those ways. So that's something I feel really good about.
Hershey is, we sort of talked about it in the intro. It's a brand that's been around for a while, very iconic. When you think about growing a brand that has a lot of legacy, what do you think about as what we have to change and what we have to keep the same?
Yeah, I think about it a lot. And it starts with, Hershey's strength is enduring. It's category leading awareness, share, voice, and it's all born from Milton Hershey's vision of democratizing happiness and built over a generation of people having shared moments together over these brands. And that's really profound. So we're protecting that core while evolving the system behind how we tell the stories. So that means using data, modern channels, cross-functional ways of working to deliver the right story to the right people at the right time. And it's that combination, modern human stories plus scalable systems, that's already proving way more effective than traditional approaches alone in the campaigns we've been running.
Let's just say you've had a iconic brand run. You've done Amex, PepsiCo, a bunch of brands at PepsiCo, all really lasting and enduring, very famous brands. What surprised you most when you stepped into the iconic brands at Hershey from maybe your past experience?
Yeah, you said it. I was blessed to work for iconic companies, again, that performed well, had strong values, talented people. And there's two things that I think make Hershey unique. So the first is that unlike most large global corporations, it is inseparable from its founder's intent. Milton and Catherine Hershey endowed a school that continues to invest in children's education and care. And that mission shows up in our enterprise every single day. It's the Milton Hershey School and the broader Hershey ecosystem are such a significant part of the company's strategy and focus. And that is very unique, in my opinion. And number two, we have an experience-led brand ecosystem with fast feedback loops that allow us to test new things and experiment. So we have physical spaces where our brands come to life. There's Chocolate World locations in Hershey, in Times Square, in Vegas, just to name a few places. And there you can create your own candy bar. You can experience our brand through recipe creations. You can buy exclusive products you can find nowhere else. And then on top of that, we have our partners at Hershey Entertainment and Resorts who operate Hershey Park, which I hope you visit, and a number of other hospitality experiences. And that brings our brands to life like very few companies in the CPG space can do.
I feel like whenever a new CMO or chief growth officer or chief brand officer or whatever, oftentimes brands can be very schizophrenic and inconsistent because you have a new leader or a new voice that they want to maybe put their stamp on it and change a lot of maybe how you've done in the past or the way you've gone to market. Do you find that is a common thread, or do you find that most people sort of subscribe to the consistency, know what you stand for? I'm just curious how you see that.
I think restraint is harder than reinvention. And I think both are acts of brand stewardship. And so if you're in an environment that rewards restraint when it's warranted and rewards finding ways to keep consistency but build modernization and stay relevant, I think that's the best path forward. But I think there are some environments where it's always the shiny new object, and there's pressure to deliver new things, and it becomes very difficult. But it's one of the things that I believe most strongly in is that you can lose your people, you lose your consumers and your audience you if you change what your brand stands for all the time. It's very hard to build meaning and value into a brand if you're not consistently standing for the same thing.
I love the idea of restraint is harder than reinvention. I think that is such a good line and very insightful. Candy. Let's talk about candy. It's emotional. It's nostalgic. It's bright. It's visual. It's fun. How do you think about pairing that kind of emotional aspect of what you're selling with sort of the data, numbers, spreadsheets? Like, that is soul and science, but how do you put kind of those two things together and make sure you're driving performance and sales and numbers, but also hitting the head and the heart at the same time? Like, how do you think about that?
Well, first of all, candy is emotional, nostalgic, visual, and super fun. I mean,
Super fun.
I say to my team all the time, we are kids in a candy store, and how lucky are we that we get to come to work and do this job every day. So first of all, we don't want to lose that, and our creative and media strategy has to honor that emotional pull that people have to the categories while adapting to how people consume content today. So, we know this, the world shifted in a few big screens to just infinite number of small ones and touch points. And that means our storytelling needs to be just as powerful at 2 seconds as it is at 30 seconds, but it still needs to be powerful. So I'd say there's a couple ways we're doing this. The first is we're pivoting from one idea pushed everywhere to platform fit creative built for how people scroll. And I mean, that sounds obvious, but I think a lot of brands and companies are still stuck in create the 30-second ad and then put it in all the different places. We're canning that, and we're starting from the platform first. The second is we're moving from siloed functions to an integrated consumer connections engine. So creative is no longer sitting over on an island for media and brand. It's all connected, design, data, analytics together. And then third is we're changing our mindset. So we were in a reach first mindset for a long time, and we're moving to more resonance first.
On the idea of like candy is emotional, fun, visual. It's all the things you mentioned. It's also inherently indulgent, and in an increasing health conscious world, and better for you alternatives. What's Hershey's stance on that, and how do you balance permissible indulgence and great tasting candy, but also this sort of movement towards better for you alternatives?
Yeah, well, first of all, Hershey's is a total snacking company, and our ambition is to continue to play in all different parts of snacking. So today we have the confection business, which we've talked about. We also have a really exciting salty snacks business. We have a protein business. And so we're in a lot of different aspects of snacking. And the way that we think about the portfolio is we use a demand landscape that helps us understand the drivers of consumer demand for every time that they reach for, a consumer reaches for a snack. What are the needs? What are the attributes? What are the occasions for each of those moments? And, there are times where people need a treat, and it doesn't matter even if they live the healthiest lifestyle. It is important for their wellness to have a little bit of a treat to share with a friend or family member, to celebrate a season. That is always going to be important. But it doesn't mean that we want people using candy to give them an energy boost in the morning. We have protein bars for that. Or, times when they're having a party and enjoying a snack over a movie, that might be a popcorn occasion with a better for you popcorn that we have. So we really are thinking about architecting a portfolio for choice and deliver the highest quality product portfolio that we can to best suit each one of those moments and delight people.
I love that. So you're looking at it kind of holistically
Yeah.
and expanding into salty snacks and new categories. You mentioned at the top, your role is really cross functional.
Yeah.
It's really about bringing together commercial teams, R&D, marketing, I believe. How do you build those teams so they're collaborative, they're going after the same goal, they function in harmony? I know that's not always easy.
Yeah. I'm glad you asked it. I think a lot about it. And I think first you kind of acknowledge the truth that all those functions do have different points of view and should have different points of view. And it's the diversity of perspective that I think makes the work stronger. That's why I believe bringing all of those functions in one place and having those debates is making our work better. And the goal isn't to force sameness, it's to create shared clarity, language, and systems so that the differences become a strength instead of a friction. And at Hershey, we have a few things in place to drive that alignment in the right places. So the first is we start with as much clarity as we can, align on the frameworks, the priorities, and the processes to get the work done. Second is we break down silos by uniting growth levers early, not downstream. So we bring all the right people together and align on KPIs and what we're trying to accomplish right from the beginning. Third, we use a shared operating model that connects consumer insights to commercialization, and everyone knows their role in that operating model. Fourth is about behaviors. So we model the behaviors required for cross-functional trust. And then finally, creating shared accountability for outcomes, not just inputs. So each function is going to own a different input, but the outcome and how we define success has to be shared across the full team.
Can you share an example anywhere that maybe you didn't necessarily do what the data told you to do?
Yeah, I think a good example and something we deal with a lot is our marketing mix modeling. And I think that the good marketing mix modeling is a great way to look at isolating the variables that drive the business. So it isolates media and trade and all the different factors, and it returns a return on investment. It's a function of how effective your marketing is and also how expensive your media is. But it is not perfect, and it is flawed. And when you look at, I have been in many situations where you look at that data, you sit with the analytics team and you look at the ROI, and it would say buy the cheapest cable television at 15 seconds with your biggest brand and run that until it wears out, and that would be the biggest return on investment. And we know in our gut, and I know in my gut, certainly that is not the way to build long-term relevance. But building long-term relevance and brand strength is very hard to measure. So I think the times that we have the hardest conversations and I end up relying on gut and intuition a little bit is where you need to push into new spaces that are hard to measure, that are a little bit less proven, that we can't count the dollars yet, but we know it's where the consumer is. And we know that for the long-term health of the brand, we need to connect with people that way.
Do you have a carved out, like to that end, like an experimental budget or a what the hell budget? We're going to try, maybe it says we should do that. We're still going to do that, but I'm also going to, invest a little bit in this experimentation because we'll either learn that it'll work and pour more money into it, or we'll learn that it's not the way to go for our brands. You carve that out?
Yes, we've done a couple things. So first is we are in the process of making the model a little bit more nimble, a little more nuanced and faster so that we can get feedback on our marketing in a more timely way. So that's the first thing. The second is, yes, we have part of our budget that we don't hold ourselves to the same types of return that we do on call it the tried and true part of the budget. And we play with that, we experiment. The third, and maybe the most important though, is that we're just getting a lot faster in how we're reading results of campaigns, we're optimizing, gathering insights, and making changes in the plans in much more real time than we ever have in the past. So that even when it's, the bigger part of the budget, we can take a little bit more risk because we can see faster if it's working, if the effectiveness is there in any channel, and then put more money behind it or change to a different brand or optimize however we do it.
Is there anything that you've taken a risk or experimented with that just went gangbusters?
Yeah, I mean, we're just coming off of the Reese's Oreo launch, and in an old world, we would have created a couple of 30-second ads and run it on TV, and probably done quite well. What we did this time, though, was a completely different model. So we said, hey, this is a launch. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but people have been asking for a
Yeah.
combination of Reese's and Oreo for a very long time.
Yes.
And so we said, hey, let's give this to the fans and put the launch in the hands of the fans and the people that have been asking for it. And so it was truly a social, earned, kind of culture first launch that relied very little on traditional paid media. And the return on that was way more effective than we would have seen in our traditional channels. And it's been one of the biggest launches in the candy category in a very long time. So it really proved out, but we learned along the way. We learned, some parts of it work better than others, and we're continuing to optimize as we go.
Yeah, they're absolutely delicious.
Yeah.
And they're
Hard
amazing.
to resist. Sorry, Ben.
They're amazing. So I want to just ask quickly kind of about some of the snacking brands.
Mm-hmm.
Do you market them in a similar way, or Dots has such a like built-in audience that loves that product for a very long time?
Yeah.
I think like I don't know what
We have Skinny Pop,
Skinny Pop's like a new taking over, and you see it everywhere.
Yeah.
How do you think about like, okay, this brand has this type of halo, this brand is newer, so we need to market it in different ways, and it's just a lot to constantly think about each brand going out in a different way, right?
It is. I mean, this is why I think the benefit of having some standardized kind of processes and ways of thinking through marketing strategy is really helpful, because we start all of that the same way, which is, who is the consumer we're trying to solve? Where's the growth opportunity with that consumer? So in some places, like, we had been talking about Hershey's and Reese's and those brands, because there are such ingrained familiarity and memory, that is a starting point. Going to people that love you, really understanding their stories, amplifying that's a way to operate some of those brands. And to some extent, Stop is like that. But then you have new brands, Skinny Pop. We just welcome Lesser Evil to our family. And those brands, we need to introduce to a wider audience. So the job to do is different. We still want to connect the human truth and the consumer insight, what people are looking for, with what our brand's about in a relevant way, tell a consistent story through scalable systems that are modern. That all stays the same. But the type of message you tell to a new audience that doesn't know anything about your brand versus, 100 years of heritage, yeah, that comes to life differently. But in the way that we operate, and the way that we have discipline and how we identify our audiences, build our brands, build our total connections ecosystem, that remains the same no matter what brand or category it is.
Yeah, so it's repeatable, right?
It's repeatable.
It's repeatable and scalable, and you have a
That's right.
method, and that new brands come in that maybe you acquire or you launch something new, but you
That's
go
right.
through the same system, so it
Correct.
works.
Correct.
Switching gears, what is an emerging consumer behavior or something happening in cultural shift that is exciting for your Hershey brands, and maybe one that's challenging for a legacy brand?
It's interesting. The volatility, the uncertainty, the amount of new things and messages, the shifts, everything that's happening is actually we're seeing a need for familiar comforts. And, yes, people want to try new things, but there's a little bit of sensory overload where you just want to spend your hard earned dollar on something that you can trust is going to be a great experience every single time. And that really is a benefit, especially brands like Hershey's and Reese's that we're talking about. Everyone I talk to has a happy memory of Hershey's. So I'm not going to ask you what yours is, Jason, but most people will tell you about having kisses with their grandparents, roasting, marshmallows and having s'mores with their family, Easter baths, et cetera, et cetera. And so in a world where you're feeling a little uncomfortable, which people are right now, and loneliness and volatility and some of that heavy stuff, going back to a brand that just gives you that comfort and inspires that happy memory is super powerful. So we're seeing that, and that's a tailwind for our legacy brands. I think where the flip side of that can be is there is also a shift toward texture, bold flavor, newness, just novelty. And it's not that we are not capable of introducing those types of products, but if we do it on our legacy brands too often, we dilute what people love us for. And so it's really that balance of how do you lead consumer, how do you tap into consumer trends and some of those textures and flavors that people are looking for, but not dilute that familiar comfort that people love so much, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense, because I think you're trying not do flash in the pan novelty
Right.
things that are the flavor of the month and then they go away, because that'll dilute those core memories of the brands that
Correct.
have been around for a long time. But you also don't want to miss the boat, so you have to make real smart choices.
Exactly. And that again comes down to the portfolio. And what's so great about having a broad portfolio is we also have amazing sweets brands. We call that, like, Sour Strips and Jolly Rancher. We have brands that we know can push the envelope a little bit more in terms of the boldness of the innovation and the types of things that come out. And so that's how we play it. We try to make sure that we're in front of the consumer and we are responding to everything out there, but it's not going to be on every brand every time.
What's the hardest part of a chief growth officer's job?
That's a great question. I think it's related to the last question. I think the hardest part is not chasing short-term growth, but really keeping your eye on the long-term play. What is sustainable? Where can we find platform opportunities where we can grow for years to come and set up the company, for that future success? It is tempting to see opportunities to chase a competitor, to potentially buy some market share by investing in trade or something like that. And those are things that if you're trying to close a year or you have pressure on a quarter, those are things that are tempting to do, but it just creates a problem for the future and it's not sustainable. So I think what I spend a lot of time thinking about is how we invest our resources, people, money, capabilities in building for the long term, and then sequencing some wins along the way. So we're making sure we're delivering quarter to quarter, but we're doing it in a way that ladders up to the long-term plan.
What do you love the most about your job?
Besides getting free candy?
Yeah, can't be getting free candy.
I absolutely love my job. I love the challenge. I think looking at big problems and then use analytics and creativity, as we talked about, to solve those problems with our brands, and using both those muscles to come up with ideas that are unique and breakthrough and no one's thought of before. I just think I'm the luckiest person in the world to get to do that on this brand portfolio.
It sounds like you have a cool job.
Yeah. And I work with the best people in the business, so that's nice too.
That's always nice. Shout out to the best people. One question I wanted to ask is how you foster creativity and risk taking inside a organization that sounds like it's a well-oiled machine with a lot of processes, ways of doing things. How do you foster that with your teams and make sure that you're taking enough risks and that you're giving enough space and freedom for your teams, but also not veering so far off the tracks, so to speak?
Yeah, I think you have number one, you have to create a safe space to take risks, and I think speed and agility and psychological safety are actually very much connected. So the first thing is we try to create a culture where learning and acting boldly and failing forward, those are all things that are rewarded and celebrated. because if you're not feeling safe to do those things, you never will. So that's the first, creating that trusting environment, that safe environment to take some risks. That's been a big focus. The second is, we want to reward the right risks. So, we have the foundations in place in terms of brand guardrails, strategies. We even have brand fit scorecards where we're very clear about when you do something and when you don't. And, with your operating within those frameworks, it's not meant to be constraining. It's meant to be freeing, because you have a playground where you have a sandbox where you can play. And so when people take risks within that, we feel great, do that all the time. It's what we don't want is for people to go outside of where our brands can stretch or outside what our company should be doing. So we set those guardrails and those strategies, and then we create an environment where people feel trusted and safe, and hopefully we get the right level of risk taking.
I want to talk a little bit about, because you mentioned sort of at the beginning, philanthropy, and the Hershey Foundation is part of that. The company's been around since 1894.
Yep.
And it sounds like this idea of philanthropy has been at the beginning of the company, or the root of the company. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that and why that's important, and what Hershey does in the world?
Absolutely. And lucky for everyone listening, you're going to get to see that on a big screen in a Hershey feature film at the end of this year. That's going to tell the whole story of Milton Hershey.
No way. That's great.
I was very excited about that. But it is an incredible story. So Milton and Catherine Hershey did not have children of their own, and they built this amazing company that democratized chocolate like no one else did. And they made a decision that they wanted to use all of that success and that fortune to endow a school for children that needed it. That started way back when Milton founded the company, and Milton and Catherine founded the school, and continues to grow today, where there's thousands of students at the Milton Hershey School in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And even as recently as the last couple of years, they're continuing to open additional schools. So there's Catherine Hershey schools that are early education centers. And so the Milton Hershey School is continuing to reach more and more children. And the profits of the Hershey Company are a big part of how that happens. And so just the DNA of giving back to the community, making a positive impact in the world, and building up the next generation, that has just been ingrained in the culture of the Hershey Company and all the Hershey, everyone associated with Hershey. There's lots of different Hershey companies, but it's just been part of that story from the beginning. And people that are drawn to work for Hershey have a real connection to that mission.
Tell me a little bit, if you can, about the movies coming out this year.
Yeah, so this is going to be a full year of Hershey's. So we're making a big investment in the brand. We're actually kicking off this new campaign at the Olympics in just a few weeks. And the campaign's called It's Your Happy Place. It's a really beautiful way to showcase how happiness is a choice and has always been a huge part of the Hershey's brand. Hershey's always stood for happiness. And so we'll bring it to life throughout the year in different moments, starting with the Olympics. And then it kind of culminates later in the year when we'll have this movie that tells the story of Milton and Catherine, and a lot of parts of it. It's their love story. It is his resilience and how he always was an entrepreneur, but he failed many times, and until he made it, he's very resilient. He kept trying to find a way to bring chocolate to the masses, and finally did. And then the most important part of the story is then how he decided to turn his fortune over to the children and to start a school.
Do you have a mantra or a quote that you come back to, or that you've always come back to throughout your career?
Is it going to shock you if I use a Milton Hershey quote?
No, but that sounds like this is a new mantra.
Well, it is, but it is how I've always lived. So the quote is, "Business is a matter of human service," and what he meant was, his belief is that companies should improve people's lives, strengthen communities, and go beyond financial profit. The way I think about it is if you do right by people, you do right by your consumer, and you do right by the people you serve, business success will be an outcome of that. And so I always try to keep the person in mind when I'm making decisions, and I know the bottom line will come from that.
I mean, that's a great quote.
He was a really smart guy.
That's a very, very strong quote. And I think sometimes we overlook that. I think we overlook the consumer and keeping them at top of mind because we're, focused on, I don't know, the numbers or a new platform or new idea, but we maybe miss that reason why we're doing it, right?
Exactly.
Well, I just want to say as a sign off, congrats on a real amazing career, and we cannot wait to see how you impact Hershey moving forward and where you help take the brand.
Thank you. It's just a lot of fun.
Soul and Science is a Mechanism podcast produced by Maggie Bowles, Ryan Tillotson, and Lily Jablonski. The show is edited by Daniel Ferreira with theme music by Kyle Merritt. And I'm your host, Jason Harris.